Welcome to GrowthMentor Live. We are talking about today how to survive the Google March update. I am joined by our SEO and content marketing experts today, Aatif Mohd, Mile Zivkovic, and Maeva Cifuentes. So we're going to be talking through a lot about the update and basically what sites got hit, what you can do if you're noticing that your rankings are tanking, and then also a little bit about how you can use AI in an ethical way. So we'll go ahead and jump right into the panel discussion. All right, all. So I think, there's a lot around what the Google update said. And, in this case, is Google really talking specifically about AI? Is there anything that specifically says AI generated stuff is going to be penalized? And I think, do we have anything that indicates that? Maeva, could you speak to that one?
Yeah, so just to summarize what the actual March update said before we get into the AI, I mean, I don't think it specifically mentions don't use AI, but what it was trying to get rid of spam. So every Google update has always been trying to get rid of spam, but this one is particularly powerful because it said that it's going to eliminate 40% of the low value, unhelpful kind of content that exists. And another major thing that is different about this core update is that the helpful content update, which used to be its own system separate from Google and it had site-wide signals. So when you were hit by the helpful content update before, it would affect the whole site. Now it's has multiple signals. It's integrated within the algorithm, the core ranking algorithm, and it's actually impacting it at a page level rather than a whole site level. So what this update is trying to do is prevent abuse of however you can do some large scale content production. That might be AI. It might be some versions of programmatic SEO. I don't think that a lot of programmatic SEO is not spam. And a lot of AI powered content is also not spam, but it's trying to get rid of all of those things that are created at scale in an abusive way. So if you're scraping other websites or like the SEO heist that we were just talking about right before we started recording. So that's kind of the summary of it. I didn't see that it said specifically, it doesn't say don't use AI.
Okay.
I think Google is okay with you using AI as long as it still continues to add value and as long as it is overseen by a human that is actually connecting the dots and providing something that's original. It has a lot of focus on original content that's out there. I don't know if anybody has something to add to that.
Anything else to add? Aatif? Mile?
No, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. In that case, you mentioned that SEO heist. Let's go ahead and just go into that case study just really quickly, just because I know probably that would be very interesting to our audience. So can we talk a little bit about that? Aatif, I think you had actually done some exploration on this one, right?
Right. So I think without mentioning the name of the website, I think everybody's already aware about it. What they basically were trying to do was rank for formula or how to do X or Y within Excel, for example. These were mostly formula related type of keywords. And the simple gist of this was create multiple pages by scraping a competitor sitemap in 5 minutes, something along those lines, right? And what it basically did was scrape content from a competitor site, put a spun version of it, and that's pretty much it. The front end or the UI of the page was pretty much so bland. As a user, if you were to land on that page, it's very unlikely that you would read content out of that page. And there were several pages created at scale just with the intention of ranking for these keywords. Things turned out extremely well to start off with. I think they were hitting somewhere about 400 or 500K organic visitors every month. There was this case study published online. Everybody were looking into it, and all of that happened. And then Google caught an eye into it, and then they received a manual penalty. As of today, I believe over 90 to 95% of their traffic has been wiped out from search. And it's not just with regards to these programmatic SEO pages, right? But even their core product and landing pages have been impacted and are not showing up on search.
Okay. All right, great. So I think that actually transitions really well into our next question, which is what sites actually got hit in this update? You know, who actually got penalized? I think this is a case. Aatif, I think you can speak to that. And Mile, if you want to jump in as well, you're more than welcome to, but we'll go ahead and just kind of talk through that.
So broadly speaking, I think all the websites which were heavily focused on AI-based programmatic SEO or affiliate or niche websites which were heavily reliant on ad network as a as a mode of earning revenue, these were primarily the type of websites which were hit during the March core update. And if I were to talk about what were a couple of reasons for it, I think, like we mentioned earlier, high publishing velocity of content published purely with the intention of driving more traffic and misusing your site's reputation, probably creating content that is not really relevant to your website. So these were a couple of reasons which led to it being impacted. But yeah, anything that you would like to add, Neil?
Yeah, so actually taking a look at the top 10 websites that were hit, there is no clear connection like websites from a certain niche or industry were hit. These are very generalized types of websites that focus on celebrities, film, healthyceleb.com, and so on. So there is no thread that connects it like websites in the health niche, or there were certain algorithm updates that hit specific industries like that. But I think what really happened is that all of these websites scaled really quickly. And if you, I don't know, publish 10 pieces of content in a month and then all of a sudden you go from 10 to 200, then it compounds over time and it's really not that difficult to notice, especially if it's a super, super new website. So to go from no production to hyper production like that, it's a very strong signal that something is wrong. And as my colleagues here have said, it's not that all these websites were hit. I know some programmatic SEO websites and projects that remained and ranked pretty well, but it's just that these types of, like the case study we talked about, that just use different tricks to rig the system, to abuse it, those were the ones that got hit. But yeah, affiliate websites are pretty easy to do that because you can just scrape content from a variety of different websites, upload it to yours, and then you can just pile up on traffic. So yeah.
So I think the lesson here is Google is always going to get its due no matter what.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
just to add on to this, Mika, I think there's another insight that I'd like to share with the viewers here. So there was this recent Google DOJ lawsuit which was ongoing, and one of the things that was disclosed was that Google uses clicks as a ranking signal.
Mm-hmm.
And even though that this report was launched, and this is probably sometime from 2016, I think that still gives us a lot of hints around how Google uses user signals and search intent just as a mechanism to understand if a certain type of content is helpful or not.
Yeah,
Okay,
we
that
found
makes
from that suit they were saying that they actually don't really know how to read content. They were like, we don't actually understand content.
Yeah.
We just see, oh, the user seems to like it. They're staying on and they're clicking other things, so this must be helpful. And that's how they were actually ranking. But they and like Atif said, it's been a while since they've done that, but they were saying in that suit that they actually don't know how to understand content, or
okay.
they're not able.
Okay. Well, I think that makes perfect sense. We actually do have a really great question from one of our audience members that is saying that having like an abnormally high content velocity may be a strong spam signal. I mean, does that change if you have particularly high quality content? I guess what they're trying to figure out is like if you produce 200 articles because you've hired an army of content writers and they're all really, really strong articles and they're getting good user signals, does that still risk getting you penalized?
I wouldn't think so. If you're at the point where you're writing 200 strong articles with great writers, so that means you're doing, I don't know, I have to do some math here, but you're spending a lot of money every month.
Yeah.
Right.
Like $200,000 a month, let's say. You're not a brand new website starting from scratch. You've been
No.
funded, or there's something there that you're able to afford that kind of velocity out of nowhere. Um, there wouldn't be those spam signals, because if you have that kind of funding, or if you have that kind of brand, or if you have that kind of revenue to be able to afford that kind of scale, there would be something else going on that Google would already have understood. Whereas if you're starting from scratch and you have no money and you say, I'm going to scale to 200 pieces a month, the only way that you could do that is with either really cheap writers, or scraping the web, or spinning articles, or AI, and then it would be a spam signal.
Okay, perfect. So there is a difference between, say, truly high quality, again, like you said, you've gotten funding, there's been something behind that change, versus, some of these folks are essentially just trying to game the system.
Yeah.
All right. So that kind of brings us to our next question, which is, all right, let's say some of our audience members have unfortunately taken a hit. They weren't expecting this. And, I think we had a lot of businesses that kind of jumped on AI just because it was trending, and they, didn't really think of it. This was not, as Aatif mentioned in his LinkedIn post, we kind of had two people that jumped on this, folks that have always tried to game the system versus folks that, saw AI and were like, hey, this may be a great opportunity. So let's say that, some of our audience members have been hit. What can they do for damage control at this point?
Maybe I can just take that, Mika. I think to
Go
start
right
off,
ahead.
uh, the very first thing that you probably should not be doing is not panic or make rash changes to your website immediately. All of these penalties which Google which happens are mostly because of your past actions and not current ones. So it is usually recommended that you don't make any changes to your website up until the entire rollout is complete, and probably wait for a week or two to see if things stabilize. And only once things start looking, if once things are stabilized, that's when you start taking some actions around it. But broadly, if I were to give the audience here some kind of guidance around how do you figure out what has happened onto your website, very firstly, you might want to understand, was your site hit by a manual action penalty or an algorithm penalty, right? These are two different things, and the impact or the severity of each are also different. So for example, when you talk about manual actions, this is something where a Google search rater actually manually reviews your website and probably says, hey, something XYZ is probably not right with a certain website owner's site, and they probably raise a request. So you can see this within your search console, within your manual request, where you will be able to figure out, hey, these are a couple of things which Google considers is not safe for you. It's a request from Google. You could manually review this, make the necessary changes. Once you've made those changes, you can probably hit on you could probably hit for a review again, and then things are pretty straightforward, and the chances of you being able to have a reverse traffic reversal is pretty easy and a lot more quicker, right? In comparison to your algorithmic penalties, these are things which happen when a list of websites probably do not follow or meet a certain list of threshold which Google considers as uh, probably gaming their system. For example, right, just to give you an example, maybe the content that is being served to a user and the content which is being served to Google bots is completely different. Maybe that could be one of the reasons why you might receive algorithmic penalty here, right? And the only way to figure out this is, you won't be receiving any update within your search console. You will have to figure out what could be a couple of reasons why your site might have been hit, uh, make a list of those issues, and you will have to wait for Google to actually recrawl and wait until this next update, wait for the next update, and to see if things are being reassessed by Google or not. which usually is a pretty long time, and not something which is not something which is very sweet to go through. But yeah, if to take things forward, to take things a little more forward, and to make it a little more precise here for the audience, let's just say you've been seeing a massive decline with regards to your traffic, and now you want to figure out what's happening, right? So to start off with, the very first thing that you need to ideally be looking at is figure out, hey, where are you seeing a steep dip with regards to your clicks, your impressions, number of keywords that you were ranking, what percentage of pages were probably de-indexed from search. You'd also want to determine were these pages purely written using AI, or was it a mix of human written content edited by writers? What stage of customer journey does this content fall under? Is this something which is important to your business? Because you will need to either consider rewriting all of this content again, or you will have to prune or kill this content, because there's no other way for you to ensure that you go back to your previous traffic levels. And lastly, once you've actually made figured out what that list of pages look like, you might want to rewrite. If you do consider to rewrite that content, you might want to focus on, hey, how do I make this content 10x better from the search results, from the content which is present on your search results? Is there something that I can monetize on with regards to purely your information gain? How do I make this content a lot more better? And lastly, just request for a review.
Okay. And you actually mentioned information gain there. And that I do want to talk about a little bit, because I don't know if this is like a really well-known part of the algorithm. So what is information gain, and how can you increase your, I guess, information gain score when you're doing articles?
So a dumbed down version of information gains is nothing but how do you add more value to a user's experience. So if a certain page talks about a list of 10 things, can you provide 12 things onto a reader? And it's not always going to be qualitative with regards to numbers per se, but it can also be with regards to quality and the kind of insights that you're delivering. So that is what information gain scores basically means here.
Okay. All right. So, doing a lot of things like, interviewing content experts, things like that, all of those would kind of fall under that information gain umbrella, right?
Absolutely.
Maeva, Mile, any suggestions for other ways that, users can our audience members can increase their information gain in their articles?
Oh, increase their information gain. I think adding rich media, so adding different ways that they can consume the content. We're very heavily focused on written content in SEO, but if you look at actual publishers' websites, or a lot of the really, really SEO heavy kind of websites, they have items like listen to this blog post, and it's an audio version of it, or lots of videos, something that's interactive and gets people to click around. I think that adds a lot of value as well. Graphics that are not stock images, but actually help you understand what the person is explaining, or actual screenshots as you're following through the thing. That's super helpful. And just really think of it as, how can I make this? It's so simple and kind of just a platitude to say, how can I make this the best kind of content that I can? And I hate having to say that, but we do have to, it's something that bears repeating. And just really asking yourself, like, is this content that somebody would pay for, or that if I wanted to, I could put it behind a paywall and people would pay for the subscription to get access to this content. And if you think about it that way, then you will add the information that you need to add in there. So like you said, it's going to be expert quotes, it's going to be firsthand experience, actual pictures, and storytelling, good data. I mean, all of these are kind of obvious things, but it's things that we still don't really invest in enough.
Mile, anything to add to that, or?
Yeah, accuracy wins every time. Yeah. So I do a lot of software comparisons where it's, I don't know, tool A versus tool B, or tool A pricing and so on. So accuracy helps you win a lot of times. Let's say you're writing an article on, I don't know, Slack review, Slack pricing, or so on. You can do research. You can put the most recent pricing, the most recent customer reviews. You can pull customer reviews from websites like G2 Capterra. Reddit has been a gold mine for me. So for a lot of my articles, if I don't have access to subject matter experts, I just go to Reddit or forums, Facebook communities, LinkedIn groups where experts hang out, where you can add unique insights that you otherwise wouldn't have access to. That helps out quite a bit. Rich media helps out a lot. You don't have to bother too hard. Let's say you have a graph where you have a division or a table that you can actually find on some other website. You don't have to pay a designer or, I don't know, spend 5 hours on it. Just go to Canva, recreate that version of the graphic yourself, upload it, provide additional value there. But for me, that value, if you don't have access to somebody who can give you a quote or their expert insights, just go and see what the top search results have. So many times the information is outdated or inaccurate, or somebody hasn't done the research or so on. So if you take a look at these software reviews as an example, many of the people who write about them have never used the software. So, just sign up for a free trial, grab a few screenshots, make sure those screenshots are high quality, they're up to date. So there's always ways to go the extra mile. So information gain can be literally anything, but for me, I get the most inspiration when I just take a look at all the other results and see where I can move the needle, where I can do something more than the competition.
Okay. Awesome. And
And
Maeva, Mile, I'm so glad that you guys actually mentioned kind of the rich media here, because we actually did have a audience member that was asking about, that they promote the ability to add audio to blog post and let users listen or schedule it for later. So therefore, it sounds like that's got a good amount of value for something like that, right? So that I think that may be a product in progress there that I think, from what you guys are saying, would have a lot of potential value to SEOs, right?
Yeah. I actually talked on GrowthMentor. I had a mentee who came up to me. He's from Israel, has this amazing product where you can turn blog post content into a type of a podcast or an audio or something that the reader could listen to in their free time. And then you can gate it, use it as a lead magnet and so on. So I think it's more of it's useful. I'm not sure how many people actually use that. If you actually attentively read a blog post, you'll see that it doesn't always read like a story. Blog posts are very structured. They have a very specific format. It doesn't read like a story or like a news article or so on. So I don't think just clicking play and going through it wouldn't be the most amazing audio recording in the world. You would actually have to adapt it to that format. So it's more like an audiobook or a podcast.
Okay. All right,
I
great.
think
When
I think just to add to that, on that note, Mika, when we talk about helpful content, I think the helpful content as a word is kind of vague. What might be helpful for me might not be helpful for someone else. And I think there is a lot of back and forth where people are not clear about what helpful content really means. So just to add some kind of structure to it, I would ideally want, if as a website owner you want to measure if your content is helpful or not, ideally you want to look into your analytics, or specifically onto your user signals, user engagement signals. So stuff like how long is a user spending time on your content, what does the scroll depth look like, if there are any probably lead magnets on your page, is a user engaging with that, if the end goal is probably driving conversions out of that page, is that user doing that. I think that would probably add some kind of structure to it, because helpful content in itself is too subjective.
That makes complete sense. And it kind of touches on another one of our questions from another audience member, which is talking about performance metrics. Did the traditional metrics remain the same? In light of this update, do they need to consider new ones? Did the priorities need to change completely? Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
I think a lot of people track different performance metrics, not different, radically different performance metrics, but they optimize for different ones. There's going to be a lot of people who optimize only for rankings and traffic. I do still track those. I see them as leading indicators. I don't think that this update would require anybody to change what they're tracking and optimizing for. We're still looking at impressions. We're still looking at clicks, rankings, non-branded keywords. I would still look at all the same things. And I don't think that this update affects that. I think what might affect some things is SGE getting rolled out. You're probably going to see like, fewer impressions, fewer clicks, still like without the rankings changing, for example, or things like that. Like that's going to affect what you expect to see in your results. But I personally don't see why this would change the kind of metrics that you're tracking, although it might affect your results. Maybe Mila and Aatif disagree with me though.
No, I agree with you fully. So I would say that you should still keep tracking the same metrics, but the most relevant ones for your business. I would just say that maybe keyword rankings shouldn't be as important as kind of metrics that actually reflect your bottom line. So conversions and clicks and yeah.
Aatif, anything to add there? Or?
I think that's pretty much sums it up.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. I think this kind of also touches on where we want to go next, which is, of course, if you are using AI in your content process, first of all, is it safe? Second of all, if you are going to use it, is there a right way to do it? And Maeva, Mile, I think you guys had a few things to say on this, so I will let you guys take this one.
Yeah. So, yes, it's safe. No, it's not safe if you say, I'm going to type in a keyword and then publish what this has generated for me, because AI is not meant to write the whole blog post for you, and that adds no value at all. It is safe if you're using it to help write little pieces, and then you give it feedback again, and then you say, no, I wanted you to include this point. No, I have this piece of experience that I want you to include, write it again. And if you keep working with it and keep giving it that feedback over and over again to the point where actually it is an original piece with original ideas, and it's not actually something that AI generated all by itself because it wouldn't have been able to, then I think it's safe in that sense, because you've actually massaged it yourself with your own insights to get it to where you want it to be. And I perfectly see a world where I say, okay, I've interviewed these people, I have my own knowledge, and then I'm actually going to write this piece with a lot of help from AI, but I'm actually giving it all of the information, and then I'm restructuring it and telling it how to think about the whole thing. That's a completely different story than saying, write me a blog post about 5 ways to cut an onion, and then it generates the blog post for you. Although maybe that's not a good example, because AI probably could write that blog post perfectly fine. Like in the B2B space, it's a completely different scenario. If you just give it a topic, it generates it for you with no input from you, and then you go and try to publish it. So I think that the one mindset that people are struggling to overcome, and I think now they're starting to get there, but I know even people from my team were like, I don't know, when I said, let's use AI, it was hard to break off the idea of AI generated and AI powered. And so they were saying, well, this is garbage. I'm never going to deliver this to the client. I said, yeah, obviously we're not going to deliver garbage to the client. But it doesn't have to be that only AI generated this part and then only humans did this part. It's a mix. You're working together. You're helping it. You're working with it. So people struggle to separate. It's either by a human or it's either by AI, but that's not really the case. You can still use all of your brain power and creativity and get it to help you. So that's my take on it.
Mile, want to jump in?
Yeah. So AI being dangerous is like cars being dangerous. If you put it to the right use, it's only going to help you, not be dangerous. So I think there's a lot of ways that you can use it that people are not aware of. There's a lot of gurus and trainings and everything, but you kind of have to figure out your own flow where AI is the helper, but it should not be the final output. So I think the biggest mistake that you can make is just having it generate something. You copy paste that into your Google Doc or into your CMS and then just hit publish. There has to be some kind of human input. There has to be some creativity, because AI can do a lot of things well. It can summarize information, it can create tables, it can pull research for you, but it cannot give you that information gain, because it's
Mhm.
just a bunch of facts that are scraped off the internet, and you literally bring nothing new to the table. So, for example, I would use it to feed it a bunch of information and then have it create a table, and then all of a sudden you have a table instead of a huge block of text. Then you can create that table into an image, upload that image, then voila, you have a blog post that has a ton more value. Or you're struggling to come up with an intro, ask your AI assistant to come up with an idiom to describe a certain situation, and then go from there. So
Mhm.
I think the people actually who use AI for parts of their content creation process are not the ones who should be worried about any algorithm update whatsoever. The only ones who should absolutely worry are those who just enter a prompt, then get something, then copy and paste that, and then hit publish. So there's a million ways that you can use it to save time, come up with some examples, or summarize stuff, or just eliminate the most tedious tasks in your content creation process. But yeah, just don't copy paste, and I think you should be safe like 90% of the times.
Yeah, the way I kind of see AI is like a really eager to please intern who's brand new and they'll do whatever you ask, but you wouldn't be like, write me a blog post to sell something to your CFO about how to set up stock options or
Mhm.
something. And then an intern's like, okay, I don't know, I'll just make it up. And then you
Mhm.
don't give them any other information. They write something that's readable and decent, but doesn't necessarily make any sense because they don't know anything. And you wouldn't go and publish that either, but maybe you would dictate it to them and be like, here, I want you to use all of this information. Kind of look at it the same way. You have to give it the same context because it doesn't have any context.
So basically, treat it kind of like a very, very new college student who would gladly just
Yes.
make up an essay off the top of their head if they needed to, if you asked.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Except you have to be a little more condescending to AI. It works better. I feel bad, but it works better when I'm condescending to it, which I would not do to a college student.
but it does bring us kind of to a question that I do want to kind of bring out directly. I think we've kind of indirectly touched on this, but they've kind of pointed out, obviously a generic prompt is going to produce very, very generic content. Is there a way of prompting it to where that human input and that human creativity side are in the prompt? The example they give would be, back to that writing a blog about cutting an onion. You would say, write a blog about cutting an onion, but use my experience with this type of knife. And I would assume that you would go in detail, I used a Nakiri knife for this, or I use a 7-inch chef's knife for this, and these were the results, kind of thing. So is that one way to get in that human input and creativity, or is just the nature of the machine still going to produce, I guess you would say, genericized output?
So I think one thing
Well,
that
oh, sorry. Go ahead, Atif.
So I think just to talk about, when we talk about AI, we ideally need to understand what an LLM is. So it the core foundation of AI as of today is it's primarily a predictive engine. And when I say predictive engine, it just tries to understand when we what comes next after a certain word,
Mm-hmm.
and it's purely based on a bunch of these back training data which they use to determine this. So most likely the content or anything that it says is kind of going to be generalized. Now, how do you make this better with your personal insights is something that you can always use to refine it further. I think we can go ahead, Maeva.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I have to kind of do it in batches to get, so I never get it right on the first prompt. I can never tell it to do, like, I say, I'm going to send you context. I'm going to send you all of this information, and then I'm going to need you to ask me the questions that you need in order to do this thing. So I send it the information, then it asks me the questions, then I answer the questions, then I say, okay, now you're going to write me an outline. Okay, then write me an outline, then I give it the feedback. now I want you to make sure to include these things in the outline because this is where we're going to talk about. So it's like an ongoing, continuing to give it feedback, and then section by section. And even then I still have to edit pretty heavily a lot of things. And sometimes I can't even use some of the things at all, but it helps me get going. It's easier than starting from a blank piece of paper.
Yeah, I've noticed the quality can vary greatly. It's basically you have some cases where it gets it mostly right and you only have to do a little bit of light editing, but sometimes you end up essentially with a word salad that you're honestly just better off writing it yourself.
Yeah. And sometimes I can be like, okay, give me a list of like 100 ideas for this thing, and I can pick a few, and then it gives me an idea for another one. And I don't have to use everything that it gives me, but it's just kind of helping me get somewhere.
Right. Mile, anything to add on that end of the topic or any of your experience that you want to throw in?
Yeah, for me, the thing that has worked, which might not necessarily work for you, is to have it generate some kind of a story where, I don't know, you can prompt it to give you 4 different ways to cut an onion. And then once you have that fleshed out and it's decently good, make it more personal by, I don't know, adding your personal experiences, adding some details that the AI couldn't get from your personal life or from a client or from a customer that you're talking to. Refer back to some of your other content, like let's say this is a story here. I used this knife, which coincidentally we talked about a couple of weeks ago in this review that I did, and so on. And you can add your own different types of content, like you referred to an image from another blog post. You can spice it up by adding some internal links to case studies, landing pages, and so on. So for me, the process would be have it generate that first output and then polish it by adding personal examples and just stuff that AI wouldn't be able to pull from anywhere.
Makes sense. And Maeva, this is actually one of our watchers has asked, what kind of questions does the AI, in your process, whenever you tell it, I need to know what you need to know to complete this task, what kind of questions does it generally come back with, or what kind of prompts are you asking to get those questions?
Well, it really depends on the prompt itself. I would have to go back and take a look. I've done this a lot of times.
Okay.
But let's say, for example, I said, if I wanted to write some LinkedIn posts, so I would never ask it to write LinkedIn posts for me. But I said, for example, if I want to create, here's my situation. Oh man, I just had an example that just came to my mind and it just disappeared. Where I was trying to summarize my mission, my vision, as like into one sentence, what I was trying to go after, and all I have is this like long, kind of elaborate thing. So I asked it to help me summarize, and I said, but I don't know, I can't just tell it summarize my vision for me, because it's gonna just make something up completely. It doesn't know me, it doesn't know anything about me. So I said, ask me what questions do you need to ask me in order to be able to summarize what my vision is in one sentence? So it asked me a bunch of questions and I answered it. Then it gave me a summary, which I didn't really like, but just going through that thought exercise helped me get to something where I could write the summary myself.
Yeah. And that's actually a really...
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I can't tell you exactly what questions, because I do this practice all the time with it, and it's always for different things. So if I'm like, if I need you to write something about this, what else do you need to know? And then it's just an opportunity to put more information back into the AI.
And I think what's really interesting about this is this kind of touches on some of the things that I've heard of, specifically if anyone follows Nick Milo and his Linking Your Thinking, he had an entire, video series that kind of talked about using AI as more of a brainstorming partner and using it to kind of do, like you mentioned, the thought exercises. So that was one of the things he discussed at length was, this is how you can use AI to kind of prompt your own thinking, essentially. And that sounds like essentially what you guys are trying to get at in a lot of this. Is it sounds like the safety range to me seems to be the further you are away from involving AI in your publication. Like if publishing is here, your absolute draft zero outline is on this side. The closer you get to using AI in the publishing end, the more that you have to be careful about it. Whereas if you're using it simply to draft ideas, get outlines, get basically, bits and pieces of blog post, then that seems to be a lot of a safer usage. And I think the lesson is also, regardless, you are going to have to edit. So I think, maybe there's something to be said about perhaps content marketers and SEOs need to learn to become more like content editors rather than, content producers. But speaking of that, I do just have a couple of more questions. Want to hit on kind of the future here, and if we have any more audience questions, guys, please go ahead and send those in, because we've got about 15 minutes left, and I want to make sure that we hit on as many of those as possible. But future of content marketing, future of SEO, where do you think this leaves folks for their roles? Are there certain skills that they need to double down and prioritize, or are there certain skills that they need to basically, it may have worked 5 years ago, but now it's something they need to kind of leave by the wayside? What do you guys think?
So if I were to put it into words, Mika, it's hard to be very specific with regards to what those ideal skills or skill sets might look like. But broadly speaking, I think one of the things that AI does exceptionally well is covering or doing all of your low value tasks, right? That's something which it does exceptionally well. So as a human, if I were to position myself and have a career for a couple of years at least, I would want to be part of projects or things where there is a bunch of this complex decision making which I have to do. Everything which revolves around, let's just say, emotional reasoning, factual understanding, trying to understand the context, nuance of what is very specific to a certain business challenge, and probably using all of your experience that you've gained from your past, trying to encounter a similar problem. This is something which I don't think AI can do very well today. And probably even if you were to consider using AI today, you still need someone to actually narrow down the brief, where you want someone to validate the output that it provides, and you also want someone to actually tell AI what you want first, right? So broadly, I would suggest that as long as you are doing something which is exciting, creative, and nuanced, I think that is where you want to position yourself at.
Yeah, I would agree with Atif and say that the skills that we need to build are strategic, like decision making, executive kind of skills, and also not planning per se, but yeah, like the management of how are we going to be using these tools. I think there's still a place. There's always going to be a place for human writers when it comes to actual storytelling and bringing in your own experience and those kind of things. But I think that yeah, low level writers, it's going to be tough because some of the AI writes better than some cheap writers at this point. It writes about the same or sometimes even better. So they're going to have to upskill in terms of, yeah, strategic planning. Even basic SEO is going to be replaced by some stuff that SEMrush does now, stuff a lot of SEOs are paid to do. So they're going to have to up level and become more strategic. A lot of the stuff where they're like, oh my God, this takes weeks to do. I don't want to have to do it. So I'm going to hire an SEO. You can do it in a click now. So it needs to become at the strategic, like, how do I tie this back to business impact kind of thinking.
And I guess on kind of that topic, are there any of specific tasks that you can think of that might be kind of in that category?
Like they would be automated or what?
Yes, yes.
I think optimization could be automated to a large degree because you have tools that give you lists of keywords that you need to include. It doesn't always do it perfectly well, but I think that can be automated to an extent. But writing itself can be automated well. We've seen it happen with programmatic SEO. Just you create a framework and then it can be written. But I think what cannot be automated is detailed research, like digging into a topic and then finding out what competitors don't have and what you should have. I think research is going to become increasingly valuable. And even more than that, talking to customers, because customers not only have deep expertise about your product and how it works, they also test it out to competition. They can tell you about that. But not only that, but you have to dig in and see what they actually expect to see once they click on an article, like 4 ways to cut an onion. Do they expect to see a recipe? Do they expect to see a list of the best knives to use for that, or something like that? So I think there's a lot of there are some tasks that can be automated, but you should only be afraid if you are a low level writer. I would definitely be worried if I were just starting out a writing career right now, but it's not impossible. So yeah.
Maeva, Aatif, anything to add to that as far as like tasks that you think would be automated as well, or?
So I think in my case, I've been using it extensively in my day-to-day workflow. So everything around, let's just say, keyword research, figuring out content topic ideas, maybe coming up with a sample brief outline. When I say doing research, I would also say just giving ChatGPT or AI a couple of competitor URLs and telling, hey, what are all the things that are present in all of these competitor sites? What are they doing better, which is probably lacking in my client side? Stuff like that. What would ideally take you probably several hours is something which AI can do it in less than a minute or so, right? Or anything revolving around creating structured data, even something as simple as creating your custom Google Sheet formulas. I find myself reaching out to AI to figure out how could I make this better. So I've just been trying to. So one simple question I ask is this something which, if I'm struggling with something which takes a lot of time for me to do, is this something which I can take AI's help with? So that is my process, and I just try to do it across, rinse and repeat it like several times.
Yeah. I do the same. I mean, everything that I'm doing, I'm trying to see, can I make this easier? Like the
Mm-hmm.
other day, we were talking to a client. We said we want to listen to some sales calls recordings to understand what topics they might be interested in. And they were like, "Oh, you're going to listen through all of these recordings?" And I was like, "Well, no, I can grab the transcript through Otter, and then I can put it through ChatGPT and say, pull out the themes, pull out the pain
Mm-hmm.
points." ChatGPT can read through the transcript, and then I can start to categorize it from there. So I can use things to save time like that, or organizing data as well. Almost everything that I do, I'm trying to find a way to see how ChatGPT can make it a little bit easier. Not just ChatGPT, but I guess AI in general. Um, but I think that we've kind of listed most of the tasks that I could think
Yeah.
of off the top of my head.
Okay, perfect. And I think that also kind of ties into one of our audience questions that we just got, is that if you've got a startup that's just getting started with content and wants to get the SEO basics right along the way, what can you do in that 0 to 1 that basically you can trust AI with, versus what do you need to kind of look at and go, we need to be skeptical about using AI in this way. And I know a lot of this will be kind of principles we've covered, but if we're specifically talking about that getting started, is there any special considerations to take into account?
Off the top of my mind, if it's just a startup, they probably don't have the funding to hire a content team. If I were to hire a content team, I would start with an editor rather than a writer, but they just need to push some content out as fast as possible. So I would have the subject matter expertise in the startup, whether this is a founder, CTO, or I don't know, customer support agent, or somebody who has deep expertise in the target audience or the product. They should be the ones creating the content. They should come up with the ideas and have the AI polish it and wrap it up so it actually looks like a presentable blog post. I think this will save a lot of time because there are millions of people who are super skilled at their jobs, but they just suck at writing, which is
Mm-hmm.
completely natural. So I think this would be the way to get started with minimum risk. if you don't want to hire somebody. And if you want to hire somebody, then that's a different story.
Yeah. Well, what path would you take if you were going to hire someone? I think you mentioned, having an editor rather than a writer. I
Yeah.
guess what's the logic there, and where
Uh,
would you?
I would probably go with, if you want to hire a writer, if you want them to use AI, then I would make sure to hire an excellent writer who can hold their own and who can write exceptionally well even without AI, and then use AI to help them scale. So, for
Okay.
example, one project that I was recently working on is we have products that I'm reviewing and I'm pulling competitors. So I created a sheet with 30 different competitors and their pros and cons. And then I just tell AI to whip up different alternatives of these pros and cons and then put that all into one article. Of course, change the transitions and so on. So I think that helps out a lot. And I would use AI if I'm just starting out, hire one really, really good writer, and then use AI to sort of help them scale content production. So instead of pushing out 3 or 4 blog posts per week, they can push out 5. But
I think
definitely not for, producing a full piece and then just the writer coming in, polishing it up and editing it. So, yeah.
One way they could really do this as well is the founding team or whoever they trust creates the main pieces of content that are really good, completely human created, completely insight created, and then they use AI to repurpose the content. So then from there, they get some design briefs. This is what we've been doing. We've been getting a lot of design briefs from AI. Like I'll just paste the blog post into it and say, give me 5 ideas for infographic, and then I have it write the copy for the infographic based on that. You can also use it to repurpose your content into social media content. So there's a lot of repurposing stuff that you can do if you invest the time in making like one really good piece of pillar content to begin with.
Yeah. But I think the lesson there is definitely you have to have that human touch on that first
Yeah.
piece of content, correct?
Yeah.
All right, so we are kind of drawing to a close on the session. I do just want to give everybody a second to give everyone just contact information. Of course, guys, if you are a Mentor member, you can sign up and get calls with Maeva, Aatif, or Mile, and basically get personalized insights as well. We'll have their profile link sent out with the recordings, and there is a recording. I will we should have that for you guys probably by Monday at the latest, but there will be a recording available. It will be emailed to everyone who signed up for the session. And but again, is there anywhere else that folks can get into contact with you guys? Anything like that?
LinkedIn is the best place for me.
Yeah.
Maeva
LinkedIn.
Cifuentes on LinkedIn.
Likewise, LinkedIn.
Okay.
Is that?
All right, great. So I think that wraps us up for the end of the session. And thank you all. Huge thank you to our mentors, obviously, for being part of this panel. I think this was a great panel that really gave a lot of fantastic info on breaking this update down. And hopefully our audience members feel like the Google update's a little less scary now that they've listened to all of this and listened to your advice.